Hello everyone and welcome to another most excellent game from the 2019 Isle of Man chess tournament. It's a game from round 3, a game I wanted to show but it didn't affect the standings all that much, but as Vincent Keymer, the German Bobby Fischer as we like to call him, won his Grandmaster title. He won his two Grandmaster norms over a year ago, I believe, and then it took him a really long time to get his third Grandmaster norm. But everyone knew that he definitely deserves it. If you've been following this channel for at least a year, you know that he won the Grand 2018, the third edition of the Grand Open tournament with 8 out of 9 points. That's really insane. In front of many, I believe there were like almost 50 Grandmasters at that tournament, and he won it in front of all of them. That's 7 wins and 2 draws, so without a single loss. That was truly an impressive result, and it's not not all that hard to believe, as he's a very talented player and he is trained by none other than Petr Leko. So here he faces Russian Grandmaster Sanan Sjugirov, and for those of you who again have been following this channel for quite some time, maybe you remember we've shown a game from the 2010 Chess Olympiad in Khanty-Mansiysk where Sjugirov defeated Magnus Carlsen in a miniature. Really a wonderful game. Also, I will put a link to that game in the description below. It will be the first thing you see, so feel free to check it out if you're interested. You know, it's not every day that someone beats Carlsen in a miniature. So getting back to this game, Vincent with the white pieces opens with d4. And okay, we have g6, the modern defense, c4, we have bishop to g7, knight to f3, we have d6, and now g3. Vincent prepares to fianchetto the light square bishop. We have c5, and d5, and here we have b5, a similar idea as you would see, for example, in the Banco Gambit. Well, you will push b5, and then if white captures, you can also play a6 and so on, give some pawns for rapid development. C captures and b5 is played. Vincent accepts the pawn, and now queen to a5 with check. We have knight to c3, and this position has been reached before, only there is one game where bishop to d7 was played. Here we have a6 trying to give up one more pawn, and it is as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. So here's how Vincent deals with it. He doesn't like the idea of grabbing another pawn, so he advances it, b6. And now the problem is black will not be able to capture here twice, because white will be left with a very nice pass pawn on b6. For example, if you now capture and trade everything here, check, 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 bishop blocks, the queen nicely guards the rook, you have to move away with your queen, now rook b1. You are threatening b7, so black will probably play bishop to b7, but all in all you get to keep your passed b6 pawn. So here Sjugirov has to react to this. He captures the b6 pawn, and now knight to d2, clearing this diagonal for his light square bishop, and also preparing to bring the knight to c4, as it's a very nice outpost for the knight. We have knight to f6 and bishop to g2. Both players castle. We have castles, castles, and knight b to d7. With b3 by Vincent, also preparing to fianchetto his dark square bishop as well, and now a5. With knight to c4 now, with an attack on the queen, queen to a6, and now knight to a4, not allowing this pawn to be pushed any further, and also preparing bishop to b2. If black makes a discovery with the knight, then bishop to b2 can always be played. So knight to g4, now the bishop opens an attack towards the rook. We have bishop to b2 blocking, and now comes bishop captures on b2. We have knight a captures on b2, and now comes knight g back to e5. Vincent trades once. We have knight captures on e5, we have knight captures on e5, and now f4. Vincent so far doing a great job keeping black's pieces at bay. Knight back to d7, and black still has to figure out how is this knight getting into the game, and also, more importantly, how is this light square bishop getting into the game. We have rook to c1 by Vincent, a normal developing move, and now knight to b6. And a4 now, again not allowing black to make any breakthroughs with a4. So a4 by white, and bishop to g4 now. Black is able to develop his bishop now with an attack on the pawn here, so you cannot play e4 as white wants to play e4. Also, you're just threatening to capture it with just bishop captures on a2. On e2. So rook to f2, an odd square for the rook, but it's only temporarily. You want to play h3, push the bishop back, and then you'll push e4, and your rook comes alive, so it's not a problem. Rook f to c8, now preparing to push c4, and here h3 as planned. We have bishop back to d7 again, not allowing black to develop, and now finally e4. And here black really wants to push c4, but here it's not so clear if he can do it right away. For example, if c4 here, b captures on c4, you have to find rook a to b8. If you don't find it, if you just continue the game, you might as well lose the game right away, because if knight captures, you're just going to play rook captures, and bishop back to f1 wins the game on the spot. So c4 is a nice move, but it's a really complicated move. So queen to a7, getting the queen away from this bishop's diagonal, and also putting the queen on this diagonal that the king occupies might come in handy in the future. With f5, Vincent, as now all of black's pieces are stuck pretty much on the queen side, starts an attack on the king side. With f6, and now comes h4. King to g7, and now g4. Here Vincent prepares g5. We have rook to f8. If the f file opens, then you want to have your rooks on the f file, and now g5. So here a lot of tension here, and the position is definitely going to open up. We have rook to f7 by Sjugirov, preparing to bring the other rook into the game. And now comes knight to d3, preparing to bring the knight deeper into the attack via knight to f4. With c4 finally, and here Vincent ignores black. He goes knight to f4, c captures on b3, queen captures on b3, and now knight captures on a4. And now what do you play here? Feel free to pause the video even and try to find an interesting move for white while I give you a couple of seconds. Now, for those of you who found an interesting move, Vincent here played queen to g3. When I saw this position, when I first saw it, I said, yeah, knight e6 is what you play here. And knight e6 is the strongest move recommended by the engine. Although, even though I saw it right away, it's one thing to see it, it's the other thing to actually play it, because it does require a lot of calculation. Because, of course, if knight to e6 check and bishop captures, now, of course, the knight is unguarded here. So if you continue, you just capture the bishop. Now the rook is under attack. And now, if you move the rook, you're just going to lose the knight. So here you have to play knight c5 with an attack on the queen. And only after rook captures and queen captures do you capture on f7, and you end up this variation being up a light square bishop. Although for the moment that bishop isn't doing all that much, and black has a passed pawn ready to be pushed. So although you are better here as white, it's not easy to go into something like this if you're not all too sure and don't have all that much time to calculate. On the other hand, after knight to e6 check, you don't have to capture. If you go king to g8, then the variation becomes really interesting, because now you get rook to c7 attacking the queen and the bishop, but you are not winning a piece here because black has queen to b6 now attacking the queen here, and now you have to find that after queen captures, knight captures, this defends the bishop, and now you have rook to b7 attacking the knight, and if the knight moves, you're gonna finally win the bishop. So the only way to defend the knight is rook to a6, and now of course you have to find rook b8 check. The knight covers g7, so you cannot go there. You have to block with knight to c8, and now finally rook to c2 wins you the game, as now you don't really have any other moves. You don't have a way to guard the knight here. The capturing doesn't help you, because then the rook on f7 also gets under attack. So knight to e6 check does win here, but it requires a lot of calculation, which, you know, if there's a simpler move that's also nice, you might want to go with that one. So Vincent goes for queen to g3. We have f captures on g5 now for black. We have queen captures on g5 now. The queen and king are nicely on the same file, and now rook a to f8. So what do you play here? Vincent brings the other rook into the attack first, rook c to f1, and now black finds a very interesting tactic. Here Sjugirov plays bishop captures on f5, and it's sort of not a piece sacrifice, because Vincent captures it. We have rook captures on f5 with an attack on the queen, and now it becomes obvious what the idea was. After the queen was, you just recapture your piece back, because the rook on f2 is pinned. The rook will not be able to recapture. So once again, and this one is really a tricky one, feel free to pause the video here and try to find the best move for white in this position. Well, I'll give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, Vincent played knight to e6 check, and it's a beautiful move that wins the game. But there is also another one. If any of you saw king to h1, it's then just, you know, hats off to you. You are a true, you know, gentleman of the game. because here you cannot capture the, the queen, and you cannot recapture the piece because the knight is no longer pinned, and it's just, well, it's just very funny how chess works. So rook captures on g5. I mean, what else are you going to play? Now you play knight to e6 check, and now if king to g8 or h8, for example, you just get mated. Rook captures on f8 is mate, and if you start running away with the king over to the h6, then you get h captures on g5 with check, king h5, and now rook captures on f8, and white has two rooks, a bishop, and a monster knight here on e6 for a queen, and an oddly placed knight on a4. It's you know, it's very hard for black to survive this. Ideas like rook f4, bishop f3, checkmate are coming. Black could prevent this mate, but he will have to suffer severe material loss. So king to h1 really just a very exciting move, or king h2 for that matter. But okay, knight to e6 also wins, and it comes with a similar idea. King to g8, and now knight captures on f8. So it still is a queen sacrifice. Rook captures on g5, and h captures on g5. We have queen to e3 by Sjugirov, and now king to h1. So it's a bit of a same idea, only a different move order. Knight to c5. Now Sjugirov tries to bring his knight back into the game, but now knight captures on h7. Another great idea by Keymer. If the knight is captured, then it's a quick mate. Since the pawn covers the h6 square, you just have to go back, check, you go back, and rook to f7 will be mate. So after knight captures on h7, we have knight to d7, trying to get the knight back into the game, but now knight to f8. Here, Keymer wants to trade knights and then just have two rooks and the bishop against the queen. This would be completely winning. So, of course, Sjugirov declines the trade. We have knight to c5, and now knight captures on g6. Queen captures on g5, and now the easiest path to victory, rook to f8 check. You just win back the queen. King to g7, the other rook checks on f7, check. You have to capture here, and now rook to g8 with check. White is just up so much material, then he can afford to do this. King captures on f7, and now rook captures back the queen, so rook captures on g5. King to f6, attacking the rook, and now rook to h5. So black still has some counterplay with the passed a-pawn, but it will be very difficult. Sjugirov starts pushing it. We have a4, bishop to f1, preparing bishop to c4, so you guard the a2 square, and now knight to e4. King to g2, and now knight to c3, guarding the a2 square. But it's not a problem. We have bishop to c4, and now a3. We have king to f3, and now comes e6. Hoping to get the bishop away from this diagonal, but it doesn't work. We have d captures on e6, d5, attacking the bishop, and here Vincent played rook captures on d5. The idea being that if you capture, bishop captures, you control your passed pawn and also the queening square, so this pawn is never crossing the a2 square, and you are just going to bring your king over here, for example, and then push the pawn to victory. And if after rook captures on d5 you play this move, you eliminate white's passed pawn, then just rook d3 check opens up a discovery. You win this guy here, and it's again game over. So after rook captures on d5, Sjugirov played a2, and now Vincent just played rook to a5, guarding the a2 pawn. You can just play, for example, bishop captures on a2 on the next move, and it's game over. Black has no counterplay whatsoever. So yeah, after this rook to a5 move, Sjugirov resigned the game, and an excellent victory for Vincent Keymer in this Isle of Man chess tournament, where he won his third Grandmaster norm, and on the next first of the month he will be he already has his Grandmaster title, but I believe it will be officially GM instead of IM on all the websites as of first of the next month. So yeah, that's really amazing stuff. So I'm very happy for young Vince. After all of his achievements, it's time to put those two letters GM officially next to his name. And like I said, if you're interested in Sjugirov's miniature against Magnus Carlsen, it will be the first link in the description below. So do check it out if you have some additional time. I would also like to thank Joshua Witter and James Perisco for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. I will cover a few more games from the Isle of Man chess tournament, the games that I didn't have the time to cover, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and we are about to start a vote for our next big saga. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.